So, for this video, we will be doing a short guided tour of AutoCAD 2020. As we can see right now, after the application has been opened, we will be faced with the initial startup screen. The startup screen, or the splash screen as it's sometimes called, contains various starting buttons to initiate a drawing. We can take a look at the left-hand side where at the Get Started portion of the screen, we have the large Start Drawing button. If we click this button, what we will do is we will enter into the drawing editor. However, it is a start from scratch blank sheet of paper. No settings have been placed, and the user will be responsible to set up all of the required settings such as layers, text types, dimension types, and so forth. We can eliminate this additional work by using a template. The template is located in the pull down right below the Start Drawing. If we click the button next to Template, it will expose the small library or the initiating library within AutoCAD, which contains various generic templates that we can start with. These templates can also be customized for your own needs and then saved back into the library. We will be looking at creating templates in the upcoming video. The two primary templates that we will be looking at, or we can use, is the ACAD.dwt, .dwt being the format for drawing template, and the ACAD ISO.dwt. These two are extremely important because they actually allow you to enter into the software, into the drawing editor, and begin work with the minimum number of additional settings which can be added to. So for that setting, before we continue, let's take a look a little bit more at the splash screen. The other notable section of this particular startup window is the recent documents. Recent documents are any document that has been opened up in a certain period of time, which can be set within options and act as shortcuts to drawings that will be reused or required to be reused in a short period of time. What we'll do now is then we will take a look at the interface itself. So let us start. I'm going to start with an ACAD ISO, a metric standard. So let's click on that. And what that does is it brings us into our drawing editor. In the drawing editor, we have the various components which we will be quickly taking a look at. At the very top is our ribbon. If you use Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, and Microsoft PowerPoint, or any of the other Microsoft applications, the ribbon system should not be unfamiliar. Autodesk uses the same standard and the same protocol. The ribbon system consists of two main components. The top line, as my cursor is showing, are known as tabs, and each tab contains a series of corresponding panels. The panels are the compartments where the various tools are actually in place. In the Home tab, which is the primary tab that we will be using, it contains the two most important panels which you will be using on a day in, day out basis. The first one is the Draw, and the second one is the Modify. Before we take a look at these particular tools, let's quickly take a look at, by clicking on the additional tabs, as you can see different panels come up, to which they contain other tools which we will be using throughout our exploration of AutoCAD. Let us go back to the Home tab. And as I had stated previously, the two most important panels on the Home tab are Draw, and what we'll do is we'll drag Draw out, and Modify, and we'll drag Modify out also. So the Draw tools consists of all of our drawing tools. We can expose additional drawing tools by just clicking the right arrow, and it will show additional tools for the Draw tools. It's the same thing with the modifying tools. If I click the right arrow on the modifying tools, it will also expose additional tools. Out of these two toolbars, by far the most important is the modifying tools. The draw tools will create the geometry. However, the modifying tools will create and modify that geometry. The adage primarily is it is much easier to create simple shapes and modify those simple shapes to create complex shapes, as opposed to trying to create the complex shapes right off the bat. What I want to do now is I want to just take and put these panels back where they belong. The easiest way of doing it is by simply hovering over the right-hand vertical marquee, where it exposes a series of buttons, not only on the left, but also on the right. The very first button on the right, if I click on it, it will return the panel back to the ribbon. So I will do the same thing with Modify. Click here. This also comes into play because the panels themselves and the ribbon is what's known as shuffleable. This means that I can move the tool panels around to accommodate and make the experience of using the application a lot easier. So for example, if I wanted to put the annotation next to Modify, I will click, drag, and then drop. If I want to put blocks right next to annotation, click, drag, and drop. Customization is very important within AutoCAD because it allows us to then take all of these panels and then position them in such a way that it makes the use of AutoCAD quite a bit easier. Customization is not simply a small... By spending some time in customizing your interface, it makes the experience easier and more efficient in the use of the application. Going below the panels, we have these two tabs. We have the Start and we have the Drawing 1. If I click on Start, it takes us back to the splash screen, the startup screen. Drawing 1 is our first active drawing. If we want a second active drawing, we can click the plus sign right next to it on the right, and it creates a second drawing. If we do not need that drawing and we have not created anything in that drawing, I can place my cursor over the word Drawing 2, right mouse button, and then click Close, and it will close that drawing. The tabs indicate the drawing editor. Each drawing editor, or each sheet in the drawing editor, starts off by displaying a grid. The grid system is useful dependent on the industry that AutoCAD is being used with. The grid itself can be turned on and off. There are two ways of doing that. The first way is that if we take a look at the very bottom right-hand side to the buttons shown, there is one button right next to the word Model. When I click on that button, it turns the grid off. If I click on it again, it turns it back on. An alternative way of turning the grid on and off is by hitting the F7 function key. Hit once, it turns it off. Hit a second time, it turns it on. Below the drawing editor, we have a small... Next to importance to the drawing editor is right below. This little field consists of what is known as the command line interface, or simply CLI. The command line interface is used to give the user feedback on how he is using the application. AutoCAD is a feedback mechanism software, which means that for every step and for every function, it gives us a feedback of what we are doing. Case in point, if I was to click on Line and take a look at the command line, it would indicate specify or ask me to specify my first point. My first point I can pick anywhere in space. When I click and then drag, I have my first point, and it will tell me also what is my next point. I can click the next point, so on and so forth. So for every step that I do, my command line indicates what my next step is. If I want to end drawing anything, I have two choices. I can either hit the Enter key, I can hit the Escape key, or I can also do a quick right mouse button click. I'll just hit the Escape key. Okay. I'm going to remove everything that I just created in one step, and the way that I will do that is I will go up to my undo button, which is located right here, and I will click the undo and it will clear my screen. So the command line itself is pretty much works hand in hand with our drawing editor. The whole aspect of the command line is to ensure that every single step that you take, you are able to follow along. If by accident you click the close button in the command line, which will eliminate the command line, you can continue drawing. However, the feedback will not be there, and any tools that you are not familiar with, you will not be able to get the feedback on what your next step is. To restate or to reactivate the command line, the easiest way of doing it is just by holding Control and hitting the number 9, and that will bring the command line back. There is also other ways of doing it. However, the Control 9 is the preferred and the easiest method of going about. Below the command line, we have three tabs. Once again, we have Model, we have Layout 1, and we have Layout 2. Model space is the infinite universe that you are drawing in. AutoCAD is an infinitely large universe in the X direction, the Y direction, and the Z direction. With that stated, when we are in model space, we will always be drawing at full scale or 1:1. So it does not matter if the shape is 1 millimeter, 1 inch, 1 kilometer, 1 mile, 1 parsec. The software will be able to handle anything as big as the universe and as small as a molecule. When we are about to then print it, we will then transfer onto the layouts. The layouts is a representation of the sheet that you want to print your drawing on. The sheets themselves are configurable, and we then add what are known as viewports. These are viewports. Viewports are, for lack of a better term, dynamic snapshots of the model itself. Every viewport can be scaled to its own factor. So I can scale a viewport to 1:1, 1:10, 1:2, 1:100. It does not matter. This allows me to then display and annotate my drawing very easily by just simply using viewports. We will be looking at viewports in upcoming videos also. The final portion, which we will be introducing, is the utilities, and that is located on the right hand side. The utilities themselves are utility buttons which allow us to draw in a much more consistent and correct fashion. We will be discussing the utilities more in depth in upcoming videos. I would like to do though is just go through them really quickly. The first button, as we have seen, is the display grid. Right next to it is the snap to grid. Snap to grid allows us to draw by snapping to every intersection on the grid. Next to that is what is known as Ortho Mode. Ortho Mode allows us to create geometry in only two primary modes, either vertical lines or horizontal lines. A much more useful tool is the one next door, which is the polar tracking. Polar tracking allows us not only to create perfectly horizontal and vertical lines, but also anything in between. It is highly customizable and highly useful. We also have O tracking. Object tracking or object snap tracking is a method of ensuring that we keep all our geometry is level and within a collinear or a set geometrical relationship. And last but not least, object snaps, probably one of the most important utilities, because this allows us to ensure that all points are connected at either endpoints, midpoints, centers, quadrants, tangencies. As stated, we will be looking at object snaps quite a bit closer in an upcoming video. And with that said, that is the tour of our interface. Thank you for listening.